Today we will study about lipids and how they are metabolized in living organisms. Lipids are biomolecules and we will try to understand about their metabolism. By metabolism we mean how they participate in all the metabolic reactions in living systems, and these metabolic reactions can be catabolic or anabolic. So what are lipids? And are they the same as fats? Because we are more familiar with the word fats as compared to lipids, and sometimes they are taken to be the same. But no, lipids and fats, there is a slight difference. Lipids is the broader, higher group of biomolecules, and whereas fats is a subgroup of this broader lipid group. And fats, they are stored in adipose tissue in animals, and it is used as an energy storage molecule in the body. So this broad group of lipids comprises of different kinds. They have different structures. The major types of lipids are fats, oils, waxes, phospholipids and steroids. And of these, fats and oils are triglycerols or triglycerides, by which we mean that three fatty acids are linked to a glycerol by ester linkages. Waxes are again, they are also esters of fatty acids. Waxes provide a waterproof coating on leaves. Phospholipids, that is lipids with phosphates, are the main component of all cell membranes. Steroids, they are part of the cell membrane and they participate in signal reactions of cells. What are the roles of lipids? Lipids perform three primary biological functions within the living systems. They serve as structural components of cell membranes. So we know the unit membrane structure, and in the unit membrane there are lipids as well as proteins. Remember that fluid mosaic model that you did of the membrane structure. So they serve as structural components of cell membranes. They also function as energy storehouses. That is, when they are oxidized, they release a large amount of energy, and energy in living organisms is stored as lipids. They also function as important signaling molecules. Lipids include fats, oils, waxes, and certain vitamins are considered to be their derivatives, hormones, and essential fatty acids. Lipids are important. They have a very high energy value as compared to proteins and carbohydrates, which release only 4 kilocalories of energy per gram. Lipids can yield 9 kilocalories of energy per gram, more than double for every gram as compared to carbohydrates and proteins. Lipids include fats, oils, waxes, and certain vitamins. Fats, they serve as essential energy sources. They also serve as an insulating material in the subcutaneous tissues and around certain organs in the animal kingdom. Fats combined with proteins, lipoproteins, are important constituents of the cell membrane and mitochondria of the cell. So not only the phospholipids but also lipoproteins are components of the cell membranes. We have already covered this. Fats are a stored form of energy. They are also known as triacylglycerols or triglycerides. So why are they known as triglycerides? They are made up of fatty acids and either glycerol or another alcohol sphingosine. Fats provide long-term energy storage, insulation and protection. They are also components of cell membranes. They provide a waterproof coating on leaves and feathers. Steroids are part of the cell membranes and chemical messengers in the body. We have already covered all this. Lipids as biological molecules. Lipids are largely hydrocarbon in nature. That means they are comprised of hydrogen and carbon atoms, and they have a very low solubility in water and high solubility in non-polar solvents. ऐसा क्यों है? Because they are hydrocarbons which include non-polar carbon-carbon bond or a carbon-hydrogen bond. Everybody knows that if had there been a carbon-oxygen bond, oxygen is highly electronegative and it tends to polarize a bond. So since there is no oxygen here, all these bonds between carbon-carbon and carbon-hydrogen, they are all non-polar. And non-polar molecules are hydrophobic or water-faring and hence insoluble in water. Lipids represent highly reduced forms of carbon. There is in the whole structure there is no oxygen. There is only carbon and hydrogen. So this is a highly reduced structure. And upon oxidation, lipids yield a very large amount of energy. We already did this in the last slide. That is 9 kilocalories per gram or 17 kilojoules per gram. Though they are hydrophobic, lipids in the cell membranes of biological systems, they can be hydrophobic or amphipathic. Amphipathic means they possess both polar and non-polar groups. The hydrophobic nature of the lipid molecules, it makes the membranes highly selective to what molecules can pass through them, and they form barriers to the more polar molecules since they themselves are non-polar and they do not permit the passage of polar molecules through them. So they are acting as very effective barriers to the polar molecules, and this gives them selectivity. Consider lipids in membranes. Membranes are largely composed of lipids and their properties depends on the type of lipid which is a constituent of that membrane. So if lipids are of different types, they give different properties to the cell membranes. Most plasma membranes consist of approximately 50% lipid and 50% protein by weight. Carbohydrates in glycolipids and glycoproteins. Glyco, we know glyco is for carbohydrates. So glycolipids and glycoproteins, both having carbohydrate components, they constitute around 5 to 10% of the membrane. I have added this picture just to give you a recollection of the plasma membrane. Here you can see the bilayer of lipids and some proteins embedded in this lipid bilayer, and the sugar molecules are attached to the protein molecules. There is also cholesterol within the lipid membrane. So we can once again sum up the properties of lipids. Lipids are a family of organic compounds composed of fats and oils, and these molecules yield high energy and they are responsible for different functions. Lipids are oily or greasy and they are non-polar, and within the body they are stored in the adipose tissue. Plants, as you know, they do not have an adipose tissue. But where are the lipids stored in plants? Can anybody tell me? Lipids are a heterogeneous group of compounds mainly composed of hydrocarbons. They are energy rich and they are insoluble in water but highly soluble in non-polar solvents. Lipids are significant because they form a mechanical barrier dividing the cell from the external environment, and this barrier is known as the cell membrane. This slide shows you the structure of lipids. Lipids are composed of fatty acids and glycerol. This molecule here is the glycerol. It is a 3-carbon compound and there are 3 OH groups or alcohol groups attached to it. This is a glycerol molecule. This is a fatty acid. As you can see, it has a very long alkane chain or the alkyl groups attached to it, CH, 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 all carbon and hydrogens. But at one end it has a carboxylic acid group. This is the functional group of the fatty acid. This last figure at the base, it shows a triacyl glycerol, that is 3 acyl fatty acids are attached to the OH groups of the glycerol. Combine the first and the second figures. This is your glycerol, 3 carbons, and to the right there are 3 OH groups or alcohol groups, and here to these 3 alcohol groups are attached the fatty acids. How are they attached? By forming ester linkages between the OH and the carboxylic acid group of the fatty acid. The OH group is of the glycerol and the carboxylic acid group is of the fatty acids. So there are 3 fatty acids esterified to the glycerol and it forms a triacyl glycerol or triglyceride. This is a glycerol molecule. It is a small organic molecule with 3 carbons and 3 OH groups or hydroxyl groups, and all other bonding positions of carbons, they are occupied by the hydrogen atom. Fatty acids. So fatty acid, here in this diagram we have shown you palmitic acid. Palmitic acid is of 16 carbons. So if you start counting all these carbons, you will see that they are of 16 in number, and one end of this long chain of carbons is occupied with the carboxylic group. So a fatty acid consists of a long hydrocarbon chain attached to a carboxylic group, the one indicated here to your left, and a typical fatty acid, it has 12 to 18 carbons, or some may have less or some may have more, and the range can be from 4 to 36 carbon atoms. So what kinds of alcohols are found in lipids? Alcohols and lipids, they may be saturated or unsaturated. When saturated, these commonly include glycerol, cholesterol, and some higher alcohols such as cetyl alcohol and medicyl alcohol. The structural formula of glycerol, in this, the C atoms are designated as 1, 2, 3 from any end. But you will see that both the ends are the same. In this 3 carbon alcohol, you can start counting from any end and they will look identical. So these 3 carbon atoms, they can also be denoted by an older nomenclature as alpha, beta and alpha prime. So alpha prime gives you the third or the terminal carbon. So these are the structures of cetyl and medicyl alcohols which we covered in the last slide. That is, they are saturated alcohols. Cetyl alcohol CH3 and CH214 and OH, whereas methyl alcohol is CH3, CH228 and CH2OH. In both these structures you will see that there are no double bonds and the carbons are fully saturated with having been bonded to the hydrogen atoms. This slide shows you unsaturated alcohols. Among the unsaturated alcohols found in fats, there are a number of pigments like phytol and lycophyll. Both are alcohols and both are unsaturated. The former is a constituent of chlorophyll. So if we look at the structure of phytol, we see there is a double bond in its long chain. So this double bond indicates that it is unsaturated. Phytol is a part of chlorophyll. The other unsaturated alcohol here is lycophyll. Lycophyll too has many double bonds in its long chain of carbon atoms, and so this is highly unsaturated alcohol. And lycophyll is a purple pigment found in tomatoes. In the structure of a fatty acid, what are the essential features? Fatty acids are aliphatic carboxylic acids. That means they have a long CH chain. Aliphatic is okay. They are composed of long hydrocarbon chains, and it has a tail end and it has a head. The terminal carboxylic group is considered to be the head, and the hydrocarbon chain terminating at the other end with the CH3 group, that is known as the tail. Fatty acids are long chain organic acids having usually from 4 to 30 carbon atoms. Most naturally occurring fatty acids, they have an unbranched chain and an even number. There are two features to it, that is, the chain is unbranched and it has an even number of carbon atoms. Most of the fatty acids found in nature have an even number of carbon atoms, usually 14 to 24. And now here is the structure of a fatty acid. It has a long hydrocarbon chain, and in this case it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So this is an 18 carbon chain, and towards the head side there is a carboxylic acid group, and these are the essential features of a fatty acid, that is a long hydrocarbon chain and a carboxylic acid head group. So how do you represent fatty acids when you are writing? How will you write down all those CH2, CH2, CH2 groups, or you will simply make it short, you will cut short your work. So fatty acids, they can be represented either in their full form with the carboxylic acid group towards one end and the hydrocarbon chain, all the carbon and hydrogen atoms of the hydrocarbon chain being represented. But on the right side you will see there is a simple angular line, each angle representing a carbon. So here you can count all those bends and they will give you the number of carbon atoms, and in this long chain towards one end you can simply write CH3 and towards the other end you can show the carboxylic acid group. So this is a type of representation of how fatty acids can be represented. So what are the types of fatty acids? We know that they are long chain hydrocarbon chains, and towards the one end they have a carboxylic acid group. But how long? The carbon chain, how long will it be? So the fatty acids, they can be classified in many ways. They can be classified by length. They can be classified by saturation. Saturation means whether they are all, it has single bonds or there is a double bond in the structure, or even by whether they have an even carbon number or odd carbon content, and they can be classified by their linear or branch structure. So types of fatty acids can be differentiated by length, by saturation, by even odd carbon number, or by its linear or branched structure. So if we consider the length of fatty acids, you can have different types. There can be short chain fatty acids, that means they have 5 or maybe 4 carbons, or it can be a medium chain fatty acids in which the number of carbons can be 6 to 12, or it can be a long chain fatty acids where the aliphatic tail is of 13 to 21 carbons, or it can be a very long fatty acid chain with carbon atoms of the number 22 or more than 22. Besides the length of classifying fatty acids, we did another consideration for classifying fatty acids can be its saturated or unsaturated condition. So the fatty acids, besides being classified by length, they can also be classified according to their saturation. Fatty acids are said to be saturated if all carbon bonds are single bonds. The general formula for these acids is CnH2n plus 1 and a carboxylate group. When unsaturated, there is one or more double bond in the hydrocarbon chain. And if there is only one single double bond, it is said to be monounsaturated, and if it has more than one double bond, it is said to be polyunsaturated. So here in this diagram, you will see two fatty acids, one saturated and the other one unsaturated. Saturated fatty acid, the example we have taken is stearic acid. Stearic acid has 18 carbons, and you can see all of them have single bonds. All carbons in the stearic acid, they have a single bond, and at one end there is the functional carboxylic acid group. The second example is of linoleic acid, which is an example of an unsaturated fatty acid, and it has two double bonds in its structure, and this is again a 18 carbon acid, but it is bi-unsaturated. It has two double bonds.